And as promised, none other than Mr. Ben Wikler, who is running for the DNC Chair. Good morning to you, sir. How are you?
Good morning. I'm so good, Earl. I'm really glad to be with you today, and I'm really excited about the chance to take the kind of year-round organizing we've been building in Wisconsin to the national level and fight back against this extreme disaster of an administration that's going to be starting in a couple months.
I got a couple questions I want to ask you. One of the reasons you are running is because you believe the Democrats need to unite. You want to elaborate on that, sir?
Absolutely. You know, after elections, especially elections that don't go our way, and it's really painful to have Trump the victor in this national election and control the whole federal government. It is easy for Democrats to fall into the trap of everyone blaming each other. Sometimes that's factions of progressives versus moderates. Sometimes that's the blame game across race or ethnicity and people trying to pit different groups of Democrats and different groups of voters against each other. And sometimes it's everyone against everyone. And people, I think it's important to reckon with what the data tells us, what voters are telling us about how they've decided to vote in this election. But what we don't need is recriminations. What we need is a shared analysis of what went wrong and how to win in the years to come, because it is urgent that we do. And the number one thing that stands out to me is voters across race, ethnicity, gender, in rural areas and suburbs and cities alike. The voters that moved the most towards Trump or away from Democrats this time were often the people who felt most frustrated and angry about explosive prices and the lack of support after the COVID pandemic measures went away. Now, in Wisconsin, we turned out more voters for Harris than we did for Biden. We turned out a ton of people. There were some people who came out of the woodwork and voted for Trump, and so he got even more votes. But Harris earned a phenomenal level of support across our state. And I think that speaks to the strength of our unity and our ability to communicate and the work to be done. But this isn't horseshoes. Getting close doesn't get you to a victory. I think what we need is to figure out even more effectively how to reach out and demonstrate through our actions that we're fighting for everyone, for working people, no matter what they look like, no matter where they live, that this is the party that believes that working people should have a shot in this economy and that we should all have freedom, dignity, the respect that every person deserves.
So as a 70-year-old black man who's lived through 11 different presidential elections, I have to tell you, sir, I'm frustrated to hear the Democrats say, well, we lost because we didn't listen to people who live in rural America and who struggle economically. And so the Democrats didn't listen to them. And now we've got to move more towards, doing what the Republicans say they're going to do. I'm totally opposed to Democrats saying the Republicans stole the ideas from us. And so these people who live in rural areas decided to vote for Republicans because Democrats let them down. I'm a guy who understands what happened with Biden and his plan, and that Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin were people who prevented the very thing that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the Democrats attempted to do, is address those issues that that those people are talking about in rural America, but it was prevented by Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. And there's nothing that these Republicans and Trump are talking about that's going to address those issues. You say what, sir?
I completely agree with you. And I will add to that it's Sinema and Manchin and every single Republican who opposed taking action on this. Every single Republican, almost every Democrat, supported taking action to lift people up, to help people afford childcare, to be able to afford housing, to be able to make sure this economy works for working people. And every Republican opposed it. And they run all these ads attacking all kinds of different groups of people. But when they get power, what do? They hand trillions of dollars to billionaires, and then they stick working people with the bill. And that is Black and Latino people and white people in rural areas and cities and suburbs alike. If you're not making $100 million a year, you're probably going to wind up paying for the tax cuts for the people that are making hundreds of millions and billions of dollars. And that's what's so frustrating about this kind of election, because the Republicans do not run on what they actually are going to do when they have power. And that's why, to me, for Democrats, we can be proud of our values. They're actually deeply shared values in this country. The idea of freedom is the most fundamental American idea. It's one that we've never achieved for everybody, but it's one that we have to keep fighting for. It's what makes us who we are. And the idea of an economy that actually works for working folks, that is what Democrats at their best have always fought for. Republicans are trying to claim that they're the party of the regular person and Democrats are the party of the elite. But look who Trump is appointing to his cabinet. Look who he's surrounding himself with, and look at what he actually does in office. Last time, he did two big things. He gave a multi-trillion-dollar tax cut to the richest people in this country, and he appointed Supreme Court justices who have ripped away freedoms from the majority of Americans at this point. And that is their agenda. They're going to try to do the same thing now, and I think we will show who we are and who we're for by the way that we fight back.
If you're just joining us, my guest is Mr. Ben Wikler. He is running for the national DNC chair. So, sir, how do you propose to unite the Democratic Party?
I think that the first piece is to do this kind of analysis where we actually dig in and understand what happened. And I think that if we can do that with curiosity and with grace, that can help us to point the way forward. One thing that strikes me that we're already seeing from the data is that the people who did not see Harris's message were the ones who were most likely to vote against her. The more she campaigned, the more people supported her. And she did better in the places where she campaigned the most. And we did worst in the places where we campaigned the least. So that says that there was something about the message and our candidate that was working. And I think a lot of people are, if you're just watching the news or scrolling around online, a lot of people have that backwards. So learn what actually happened. And then it is going to be the fights that define us. And to me, this starts with fights that are going to have long-term consequences for our states and our country. So I'll put a big circle around one. The state Supreme Court race this spring, Susan Crawford versus Brad Schimmel in the state of Wisconsin. It's the first big election of the new Trump era. And Brad Schimmel, he helped to create the attacks against, his solicitor general, when he was attorney general of Wisconsin, helped create the plan that led to the fall of Roe versus Wade. He is as anti-union and anti-worker as it gets. He's a right-wing extremist, and he wants to be on Wisconsin's highest court. If he gets there, you know they're going to rig our legislative maps to ensure Republicans always win again. If we fight in these down ballot races, we've seen the impact in Wisconsin in the state legislature of having fair maps. Republicans took over the Supreme Court in North Carolina, gerrymandered that state, threw a bunch of Democrats out of Congress, and that is why we have a right-wing majority in the U.S. House right now, because of Republicans winning in state elections. So to me, the fights like Wisconsin Supreme Court race, which all of us in Wisconsin have to work on, the national party should be looking at and partnering with states across the country to fight in those races that wind up determining whether our country is rigged for the most powerful and wealthy people at the top, or whether it actually works for everyone. That is my experience. Is people come together when there's a shared purpose based on shared values. And so uniting the party means drawing a spotlight on big fights that bring us together. I'll give another example, the fight against the repeal of the Affordable Care Act in 2017. There were a million things going on in that moment, but we came together as a country and rose up against this attempt to rip away healthcare from tens of millions of people, and we won. And that became the biggest issue in 2018 in the midterm elections. There will be fights like that. And if we're working in every state at every level and drawing a spotlight to the big battles for our core values that bring us all together as a movement, then I think we're going to be able to unite and fight and win. And that's my platform: unite, fight, win.
If you're just joining us, my guest is Mr. Ben Wikler. He is running for the national DNC chair. Sir, I will ask you. Well, this is a question. I've seen that this is a text question, Tony. I've seen that the fundamental problem was the Democratic brand. Do you think that is the case more than the Harris campaign?
I think that's a fair question, and I think that the core answer is yes. And when I say that, what I mean is the Democratic brand is what people think of when they think of Democrats. It's not what we necessarily do or say. It's what people have heard and internalized. And there are millions of people across this country who mostly learn about Democrats from Republicans. What they see is the right-wing attacks that try to make Democrats look completely out of touch with what people are struggling with in their own lives. And that, to me, is an argument for thinking about how and where we communicate, showing through our actions, and also making sure we are present. We are present on the radio and online, that we're present in places where people are thinking about stuff other than politics. Because the people who tuned in and heard Harris, they were more likely to vote for her. And if people actually knew accurately what she wanted to do and what Trump wanted to do, she won those voters by overwhelming margins. that is not centrally a candidate problem. That is a problem that is a much bigger picture problem about a world where right-wing propagandists have tried to distort what Democrats are actually about.
So I want to squeeze in one more question before we have to go.
Absolutely.
And that is, this was a razor close race. And so many of us who voted Democrat don't want to see Democrats totally do away with the things that they stood for. This is a message that I think all Democrats should hear, especially those who are saying we need to change the trajectory of what Democrats stand for. Those of us who have voted Democrat forever, we don't want to see you completely, dismantle the things that Democrats have stood for.
Listen, we're in complete agreement about this. And I also believe that when people hear and understand what Democrats have stood for and are fighting for, Democrats win. If you ask people, do you want a party that believes that all of us, no matter the color of our skin or how we pray, or whether we pray, no matter where we live, that all of us deserve freedom and dignity and respect, that everyone deserves a chance to be able to support their family and have a job that actually pays a living wage, those things are overwhelmingly popular. It's the Republican propaganda that says Democrats don't care about you, that they're thinking about someone different than you. They want to take something from you to give it to someone else. That's the divide and conquer strategy that Republicans use. And in this election, it worked. But I will say something. In this election, everywhere in the world, every government that was in power lost ground in this election. And we haven't had inflation like we've had in these last years since the pandemic for a long time. So, I grew up in an era of low inflation. I hadn't fully internalized for myself, but inflation, it makes everyone want to just change the channel to get a different administration. And unless you were tuning into what Harris was saying and what Democrats were saying in this election, you might think that Trump would bring prices down. Well, his plan is to bring prices up. Democrats, Harris had a plan to bring prices down.
It's unfortunate that we're out of time. Promise me you'll be back.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, that's Mr. Ben Wikler.